Hi, this is James Jokum, host of Webcomics Reviews and Interviews. Today, we're looking at baseball and art. So sit back, relax, and let the Geek Fest begin. When it comes down to it, professional artists and professional athletes have a lot of really cool stuff in common. That is, you're dealing with somebody who's has incredible passion for something and is trying to become the best of what they can be relative to that passion. But ironically enough, the skills that make them a bigger success, that is, in a lot of ways become the success, have nothing to do with the skills that you're actually practicing on the field. That is, I don't care how great a pitcher you are or how great an illustrator you are, there's always going to be a limit to how far you can go as long as you're basically just trying to emphasize your pitching or your drawing skill. At some point, you're going to have to master a lot of other skills beyond those in order to become a great success. With that in mind, it might not be a bad idea to see what it takes to become a professional athlete, or actually become a successful professional athlete, and then try to apply that to becoming a professional artist. Before we get going, obviously, I'm going to suggest that artists join some sort of local league, be it baseball, hockey, soccer maybe. If for no other reason than becoming physically active carries with some really great health benefits. Also, you're basically come in with a great little social bonus because you're obviously going to be dealing with a team. And let's get real, as artists, we don't get to interact with a lot of people a lot of the time. Better yet, there's the stress release aspect. In this case, what I'm sort of looking at is that, well, let's get real. If you're playing one of the various ball games, or even hockey, you're basically trying to cause some damage to a particular item in order to move it across the field. With baseball, for example, you're hitting a ball. Soccer, you're kicking a ball. Hockey, you're taking a big wooden stick and hitting something plastic. And if you happen to run into other people along the way, yeah, it's a great way to just do some damage. And let's get real, when you've been dealing with a client all day, you're going to want to do damage to something by the end of the day. If it happens to involve some sort of wooden stick and something you hit, yeah, you're going to want to do something, join some sort of league. Nonetheless, like you said, it's going to be sort of interesting to look at what it takes to become a successful professional athlete and how that applies to you as a professional artist. Let's start nice and simple with good old follow-through. When it comes to baseball, when we talk follow-through, we're talking when you throw a ball. When the ball is released, you don't just simply stop your hand right there, but you allow the hand to go through with whatever motion is necessary. This is follow-through. The advantage to the throw is not only does it increase the accuracy, but it also increases the range of the ball. The logic is pretty obvious. That is, you're not putting the minimum amount of force required to throw the ball, but you're basically throwing as much into it as possible and just simply letting and seeing what happens, which I know is an oversimplification because obviously you know it's going to happen. But the key here is that by using follow-through, that is, by not stopping at the exact moment when you necessarily stop, and by putting as much effort into whatever you're doing as you possibly can, you're going to get much better results than if, say, you just simply threw the ball, and as soon as the ball was released, you stopped your hand. You know? The important point here is that you're not doing just the bare minimum in order to do something. You're putting some honest effort into it, and you're going all out. And when it comes down to it, that determination, that force is something that you need to harness as an artist. Obviously, it has some other great applications in terms of the mind game. At the very least, you know that you did not just simply put mental effort. You know that you gave it everything you got. So by the end of the day, you're going to be really satisfied in the effort you gave. There's going to be absolutely no question in your mind that you gave it everything you could possibly give it, and that you basically strove for the greatest possible success for that day. That feeling of satisfaction alone is worth following through on things. Plus, let's get real, when we start looking at reputation, an artist that follows through on whatever they do is going to be a lot, it's just going to have a lot better reputation than somebody who does the absolute minimal effort. I mean, there's just some really good stuff going on there in terms of building a really great positive reputation. I mean, sure, you basically do stuff like, you have to give 110%, but then you're going to have some idiot basically point out that you can only give as much as you got. These people are idiots. You should never let a mere thing of semantics stop you. You should basically press on no matter what. You should let your passion come in, take over, and use that passion to fuel whatever your drive is. So, there you are. Just do your best and, follow through on things. Part of this is that, an athlete will do a lot of practice. Obviously, practice makes perfect. The more that the athlete goes into the field, the better his muscle memory is going to be. And when it comes down to it, that's going to allow him to do a lot of really great things. In baseball especially, this is necessary because you've got a lot of stuff that you have to react on very quickly, and even to a certain degree, act before it happens. I mean, consider the act of hitting a fast pitch ball. You're going to need to know where that ball is going ahead of time, and you're going to need to swing as soon as you see it released. Well, practically as soon as it's released. When you're fielding, you're going to need to realize where everybody is and where the most effective place to throw your ball is, as well as throw the ball at a very specific spot, and you need to do this all pretty much without thinking. Practice allows you to do this. That is, through practice, you're not only building up the skills you need in order to succeed at the game, but you're also developing the muscle memory that allows you to reduce your reaction time. Part of practice is also looking at who you're up against and trying to figure out ways to defeat that opponent, and then training a particular new style or trick in order to, deal with that opponent. And this can be as simple as learning a new pitch, learning different ways of working as a team in order to defeat that opponent, or just simply becoming faster and stronger. Whatever works for the particular situation. Obviously, this applies really, really well to a professional artist. First off, the more you practice a particular move, or drawing a particular arm, or whatever particular field you're in, obviously you're developing a lot better muscle memory for that particular thing, or the artistic equivalent. This is going to allow you to not only draw things a little bit faster, but also draw them with more confidence, as well as to draw them, just simply better. After all, you've had plenty of time to play around with it. You can try 27 different million ways of drawing an arm to when you draw the arm the way you want it to be drawn. And in essence, you can do a lot of stuff in practice that you can't do when you're actually drawing. It also allows you to occasionally take a step back off of one particular area and try to emphasize another area. Just as a professional athlete isn't going to be doing the exact same pitch every time he goes into the practice, they're going to spend days where they practice particular pitches or other skills such as running or hitting, but the bottom line is that they're not practicing the same skill, even the same specific skill, day in and day out. They're always rotating new skills in. That's something you as an artist can definitely get behind, because you're going to need to practice a whole lot of different skills, and if you only spend all your time on just one particular area, well, 9 times out of 10 you're going to get bored of it more than anything else. Rotating in will take out that boredom, but it also gives you a chance to breathe, step back, and, well, practice something else. Just like you don't do leg day 5 days out of a week. Yeah, you're going to get an incredible pair of legs, but what about your arms, you know? Keep in mind also that part of an athlete's practice isn't necessarily going out onto the field and doing whatever they're trying to do. A good part of it also is just simply reading and discussing. That is, reading up on the particular opponent they're up against or group of opponents, looking at some of the new techniques and all that others are using to see how it applies to what they're doing, as well as discussing all of this. Obviously, we're talking about game day footage in a lot of cases, or even practice footage from other areas. But again, the big draw here and the big takeaway is that not only should you be practicing drawing arms and legs and so on, but you may also want to take a step back and go grab an art book and leaf through and see what other people have done or are currently doing. You might want to go online and discuss various art techniques with other people to see if they've had the same problem you're having, if they're trying something that you might want to try yourself. That is, you need to get over the concept that practice is just simply drawing the same things over and over. There's a lot more to it. Just going to a museum for an artist is a great practice day, because you're going through there and looking at what other people have done, how they've done it, and in essence, you're looking for new ways of doing stuff, even if those new ways to you might be centuries or millennia old. You know, practice is a lot more than just taking pencil to paper. So, have fun with your practice. Don't limit your practice to just simply doing the same thing over and over. Break it up. Have some fun with it. You don't always have to be with pencil and paper. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but you just don't always have to do it that way. Players break down the games and the season basically exactly that. Even though they'll worry about the specific game coming up, they'll also worry about the season as a whole. You know, when you start looking at the game, you're going to worry about that game and what it's going to take in order to succeed at that, to win at that game. You're going to try to figure out what skills you have that you need to draw upon in order to succeed at whatever's coming up. If you know you've got a particular team, a particular player you're going to be up against, you're going to try to figure out how to practice so as to take advantage of that person's particular flaws. That is, in this situation, you're going to try to maximize his weaknesses while at the same time maximizing your strengths as well. Well, obviously, you're not going to be the game analogy isn't completely great for an artist, but look at it in terms of individual pages or individual chapters. Instead of looking at the entire book, just look at the individual chapter you're working on, or the individual painting you're having to be working on. You're going to find out real quick that each individual book is its own entity, even if it's part of a greater chain. If I'm doing a 3-part series, well, it's still going to be made out of 3 parts. And I'm going to have to figure out how best to conquer each individual part in order to make a better cohesive whole. So obviously, you know, if I'm trying to figure out how something needs to work, well, first off, I'm going to figure out what the problem is, because let's get real, 90% of what I'm doing is going to be pretty much basic stuff. It's going to be, you know, relatively easy. I've got the practice, I've got the experience, it's not going to be a problem. It's not going to be that other 10% that's going to be a problem. I'm going to need to figure out some way to deal with that extra problem. Well, that's where you go back into practice. You figure out what your problem is, you figure out how to solve the problem, And then when you start drawing, you just simply do it. You play to win. And the easiest way to do that is by saying, screw it, I'm going to deal with this piece by piece. Don't worry about dealing with the whole big thing at one time, because that's just going to drive you nuts. Deal with whatever you use directly in front of you at that particular time. And as sad as I know it's going to be to hear, you need to realize that occasionally you need to simply give in the towel. Occasionally you're going to have to realize that you're going to have to take a loss. That should not be seen as a bad thing. I mean, sure, it's a great time to, learn from your errors, figure out how to fix them, and then be better the next time. Don't get me wrong on that. But the bottom line is that nobody ever wants to give in the towel. Nobody ever wants to admit weakness, and the surest way of admitting you're weak is by, taking a loss. The reality is, you're going to have to do that every so often. You're going to have to say, hey, I can't do this, at least not at this point in time. You can either give up on it completely or come back to it later. Personally, I'd prefer the come back to it later after you figure out a little bit more about drawing or writing or what have you. But, yeah, it's going to sting. It's going to hurt. It's going to suck. But the bottom line is you have to, every so often, in order to win the game, you're going to have to occasionally admit defeat. That's just the nature of the game. And that applies just as much as it does to baseball as it does to any kind of art. So yeah, play to win. Don't get me wrong. Because it's always great when you win. But don't be afraid to lose. And above all, figure out how to win the next time. But at the same time, like you said, if you're looking at the individual series, or the individual game, you've got to look at the whole series. And I'm not just talking necessarily the World Series, which is great to get to, but any given number of games. And here's sort of where the difference between tactics and strategy lies. That is, when you're dealing with an individual game, when you're dealing with, say, an individual book or a group of, even like one whole chapter, the bottom line is you can put full effort into it. You can put that 110% effort into it, and that's cool. You're expected to, and let's get real, it would drive you nuts if you didn't. But when you start looking at your behavior over a period of time, you've got to sort of realize that you're going to have a burst of energy here, but if you have bursts of energy, that also means you're also going to have to take a little bit of time to relax. You're going to need a day off every so often, or even a week off. If you've just done something incredibly strenuous, you're going to want to go on a beach to Aruba and just enjoy yourself down there for a week or so. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that, because, you need to rest every so often. You need to recharge the batteries. Yeah, there's going to be slumps. There's going to be times when you're depressed over this as well. You're going to basically be trying to figure out how to, make the valleys, as relatively high as you can. Sorry, this is always a weird analogy for me because, the bottom line is that you're going to have slumps in areas of depression, and you want to get over those as quickly as possible, as well as make them as shallow as absolutely possible. And once you do that, once you figure out how to do that, it's going to make your crest, that is when you're really on an emotional high, or whenever you're on a worker's high, that's going to maximize that time when you can enjoy that duration. It's just a matter of trying to figure out how to balance the two, between the work and the play, so to speak. I mean, sort of look at how a professional ball player does it. Yeah, they do a lot of practice, they do a lot of games, but they also tend to celebrate really well. They take vacations as needed. If they're having some sort of physical injury, they'll take time off to deal with that physical injury. In short, putting out the maximum effort possible also means that occasionally you need to back off and, do the absolute minimum effort. Occasionally, in order to get through the entire book or the entire series or what have you, you're going to need to take some time off and just for yourself. In short, if you're thinking strategically, you're going to need to realize that you can't put out maximum effort for the entire season. You're going to need to take a little bit of time off. More importantly, you're going to need to take time off just to take an occasional step back and to reassess your goals. Sure, a lot of times the goals are going to be pretty simple, finish this particular section. But, again, look at the professional athlete, even though he's going to be trying to put as much effort in can into scoring as many wins as possible, occasionally he's going to be wanting to set individual records. Pitchers, for example, are going to want to drop their ERA as much as possible, just as much as as much as a hitter is going to want to get their RBIs. In short, not can you just simply have the goal of finishing whatever it is, but you may have some other goals in your mind that are also career enhancing. I mean, let's get real. A ball player with great stats is a lot more impressive than one who just simply has a great win ratio. Sure, you want that win ratio, but you also want to have some sort of proof of how good you really are. That's where all those stats come in. So, setting those particular stats, setting an ERA of, say, 2 or even 3, isn't necessarily a whole lot of bad. It's setting a goal, and if you happen to do better than that goal, great. But in order to attain that goal or to exceed that goal, you have to set it in the first place. The baseball player throughout a season is going to be reassessing those goals to determine if they're realistic and to possibly even reset those goals. In a lot of ways, you as an artist need to do pretty much the exact same thing. You need to determine if what you're trying to do is actually feasible, and if so, how to best attain it. This is the difference between tactics and strategy. Tactics is just simply winning the battle, whereas strategy is about winning the war. And the way you do them is sometimes counterintuitive relative to the other. So, just figure out what you need to do whatever you're trying to do in terms of, pages produced. Are you trying to try some new art style and try to pull it off? There's 57 different types of goals you as an artist can set for yourself. Figure out what your goals are and reassess as necessary. Now, while he's doing this, a professional ball player has a coach. That is, somebody that is in charge of their training and can help them along get better at a particular skill or group of skills. Obviously, the bigger the ball team, the more coaches you have, the more specialized those coaches can get. So if you're having a very specific problem, it's just a matter of figuring out who's the right coach to go to. Also, during practice itself, you've got coaches who are constantly giving the players input. That is, if the coach notices that the person is, say, drawing towards the right just a little too much, they'll try to help the person get that aim just in a little bit better. Or, the same applies to if the person's getting way too many foul balls because of the way they're placing their feet. Yeah, you'd be surprised at the stuff that can make you get a foul ball. But the bottom line is that the coach allows a player an extra set of eyes. And by taking advantage of the extra set of eyes, they can figure out ways to deal with particular problems. On top of that, a good coach will always try to figure out, once you figure out that the player has attained a certain plateau, they'll try to figure out ways to get them off that plateau and try to teach them all sorts of new things or new approaches. On top of that, to a certain degree, what's really cool about having a coach, especially in certain areas, is that sometimes the coach will have connections that you take advantage of. After all, the coach usually was a player in and of themselves. Or they've had to set a network up in order to become a better at coaching. Well, look at this from an artist's perspective. If you've got somebody who can help you over a rough patch, that is, you're having some sort of issue when it comes to drawing or what have you, you can actually go to someone else and say, hey, I need some help with this. Everything that a baseball coach does in terms of figuring out what you're doing wrong and helping you correct that, or noticing that, hey, you've pretty much hit a plateau. That is, you're pretty much doing the exact same thing all the time and you need to change that up a little bit. Here's how you do it. You're going to want a coach to teach you a few new tricks. Yeah, sometimes you can get this out of an art book. But at the same time, having an actual person you can go to and saying, hey, I'm having a problem, how do I solve it, is a major advantage. And again, everybody has connections. And as an artist, you want to take advantage of those connections. Relative to having a mentor, that means you can go to the mentor and say, hey, do you know of somebody who does this because I need help in that particular area? That mentor can usually either hook you up with the right person or can give you a lead to that person. When it comes to the art world, never doubt the advantage of a really good coach, or in this case, a mentor. They're pretty much the same thing. I don't care how good of an artist you are, you're always going to need a mentor for something. So keep that in mind. Establish it. Once you start establishing your network, make sure you've got people within that network that you can go to for advice. Coaches are always great to have on your side, no matter what field you're in. And let's get real. We're dealing with comics. You're going to be dealing with a team, just like the baseball player does. You're going to need to know over time what your team can do. If you're working with a writer, it's cool to know what that writer can do and try to approach them on some of the stuff you're doing. Letterer, inkers, I don't care what you're dealing with. If you can work with a team, you're going to need to know what that team can do. Again, just like a baseball player. A player, in order to win the game, needs to know what the strengths and weaknesses of those around him are. Once he knows what those strengths and weaknesses are, they can work together to minimize the weaknesses while maximize the strengths. That's that really cool part of working on a team. More importantly, baseball players recognize that not everybody can do everything. I don't care how good you are as a baseball player, there's just simply going to be, if you're a pitcher, you're not always going to be able, you might have an incredibly quick, powerful fastball, but you may not have the world's greatest curveball. And in some situations, you're going to need a curveball more than you will the fast. If nothing else, it'd be fun to watch how devastating a slow ball can be. The reality is that whereas a good pitcher is going to know all those basic pitches and can, switch it up a little bit, he's not always going to be the best person for that particular situation. And by having somebody else who can come in and take over for a second or two is not always a bad thing. And again, this goes over to the battle thing. Like, even in a battle, you can't have a situation where you're going to be able to go through the entire thing. You're going to need somebody to come in and say, can you do this for me? Even if it's a few pages. If you're dealing with a comic book series, having somebody who can come in and deal with an issue or two is always going to be a good thing, because it allows you time to back off and go take a vacation. And then come back to it later. This is also a really great treat for your fans. And trust me, we're going to get into the fans. But being part of a team is that you also know your position. If you're the writer, you're going to know all the really cool, neat tricks about writing. And, you're going to know about the hero's journey. You're going to know about when to use symbolism and when to be direct. You're going to know all this, when to develop plot versus characterization. Yeah, there's some really cool stuff you can do as a writer to really do some really cool, great stuff to a story. Sure, the artist can do some really cool stuff too. But, obviously I'm going for the writer here. But so can the letterer. There's a lot of people who do some really horrible lettering to the point where they had to invent Comic Sans, which is arguably the most evil font ever. But the bottom line is that you're going to know, you should know your position to be an expert in that position. But this doesn't mean you shouldn't know a little bit about the other positions as well. If you're a writer, for example, knowing a lot of stuff about, even art history means you can occasionally go to the artist and say, hey, can you try this? The worst thing the artist can do is look at you funny and maybe hire an assassin. But generally speaking, depending on the situation, the artist may be willing to try that. The only way you're going to know for sure is if you actually talk to the artist. And the other cool thing about being on a team is that you have people that aren't afraid to call you out. If you're royally screwing up and they need to basically slap you around, they're going to do it. Obviously, a professional athlete, they have a financial reason for doing so. If you're royally screwing up games, they need to solve that particular problem as quickly as possible. Well, the same applies to the comic book industry. If you're hitting a situation where your art just simply sucks, or you're just simply not following through on the characters as much as you used to, or you let the plot go into cliches, yeah, somebody's going to need to go in and slap you around. Working with a team does have its advantages. Of course, you're also working with a team, and that can create its own problems in and of itself. But usually, it balances out, and in fact, it is even better to work with a team than working solo. So don't be afraid to work as part of a team. And I guess it wouldn't be professional athletes if we weren't talking about fans. First off, yeah, fans are great. Fans can suck. The catch with a fan is that you're always going to be wanting to figure out, let's take it back. When it comes down to playing to the fans, you're going to want to do one of these. You're going to want to play to them, and you're also going to make appearances. Well, playing to the fans can be all sorts of fun. Something a lot of sports people have realized over the years is that, playing to the fans can be sort of a fun thing. Let's have a little bit of fun with this. Let's say I'm almost tempted to just simply switch targets. There's something sort of cool about going into the baseball diamond, raising your hands, getting all the attention, figuring out who likes you, who hates you, and who loves you, focusing all that energy onto you, and then letting it express itself through whatever it is you do. This is why we have cheerleaders. If you ever want to get that really cool attention thing going, walk out onto a baseball diamond, raise your bat, get all the attention on you, and you're going to find out you've got a really huge amount of energy there. As a professional athlete, you're going to want to tap into that energy. It's going to help your endurance. It's going to help your play. It's going to help you get into better focus. This is sort of why a lot of people, when it comes to comics, say that there has to be a fandom. The fans pay your bills. Don't get me wrong on that. I don't care how much money you think you're making, you can always be making more, and the only way you can do that is by increasing your fan base. And in order to increase your fan base, you're going to have to play to the fans a little bit. This isn't necessarily a bad thing. What I'm sort of looking at here is that, you're going to have that artistic integrity question at all times. Don't get me wrong on that. Especially if you're looking at trying to create a more loyal fan base. The obvious two ways you can do this are you can create one product strictly for the fans that you're just simply going to have fun with, and you're just going to have, let's do this for the fans, and then do your own little projects that are much more artistic based, but, take advantage of the fact that you do have a fan base. If you've got a specific question about a historical entry, odds are you can go to your fans. You're having a continuity issue, odds are you've got fans that have set up continuity databases. Wikipedia is not necessarily something you as the artist will be setting up and updating everything else. That's usually left to your fans. So you've got a lot of information that you can take advantage of that your fans have given you. And that if you ask for it, odds are you can get it in turn. On top of that, if you're having a major problem, well, remember everything I said about coaches? Well, the advantage of having a fan base is that you've got approximately infinite potential of coaches you can go to that will have no problem calling you out on things. If you do something really stupid, expect to be called out on it. If you kill off the wrong hero, yeah, you're going to have a riot on your hands. But this applies just as much as if you happen to be going along a long story. Because you're going to find out real quick that if you're going on the wrong track for a particular story, you're going to hit a wall and you're going to hit it hard. But if you're paying attention to your fans and judging them just a little bit, and positively, because we all judge it negatively, just pay attention to what your fans are saying, and odds are you're not going to hit that wall. Or if you get close to hitting that wall, your fans will have provided a way for you to get out of that wall. You get out of that trap. You get the idea. Fans are not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, if somebody looks at fans just being completely useless, this person really doesn't probably have a lot of fans in the first place. The bottom line is, if you play the fans, not only are you going to find you've got some really incredible energy you can tap, but you've also got a lot of people that are trying to help you with the story. Because they're just as emotionally invested in it as you are practically. I mean, obviously you're a lot more into it than they are, but you'd be surprised at the kind of energy a great fan base can provide. And if you can pick up a couple of fans that are great cheerleaders, that is, are willing to stay with you through thick and thin, and are willing to have, just simply cheer you on as needed, you've got an incredibly great fan base. Just try to avoid the toxic ones. But that's up to how you want to deal with it. On the other hand, one of the really cool things about being an athlete is basically making appearances. From a fan's perspective, there's nothing better than the chance to actually sit down, even if it's for a millisecond, say, hi to your fans, I love you, can I get your autograph on this, that, or the other thing? And then you've got a fan who's even more energized. And remember what I said about that cute little bit of energy you get from a fan? Yeah, you've got a really neat little feedback loop going. And you can do that with each individual fan. You can energize your fans, and your fans can come back and energize you. And by making appearances, you create this neat little feedback loop that does exactly that. Every time you shake a hand with the fan, sign what they want, say hi, just like baseball players have realized since practically day one, the more energized your fans are, they'll power whatever you need them to power. And baseball players, I'm out in the middle of a field, I've got a bat in hand, I have no idea what to do. I'll do something incredibly silly just to get somebody's attention and focus them on that, and look at what happens. You've got urban legends based on stuff people have done for fans. And as long as fans are aware of those urban legends, you've got a power source you can tap. I mean, look at what the Babe did. Babe Ruth went to a hospital, said, hey, I'll hit this ball this particular area. When I do it, you'll know it's for you. I'll hit it right over second base. And when I do it, you'll know that it's for you, and I want you to get better. Well, as it happened, during the baseball game, the Babe hit a ball right over second. And this, of course, made his fan in the hospital, eventually the guy got better. And yeah, 90% of that's pretty much urban legend. But look at the galvanizing effect it has to all the other fans of the Babe. He was willing to do this just to make that kid get better. That's what they're thinking. This is somebody who went to the mat for us on something, just to prove that, He could. And more importantly, he did it for us. If you can set up that particular link between you and your fans, you've got a really nice little energy source for later on. And yeah, there's even a certain degree where this is, I mean, yeah, it's going to be incredibly stressful because, let's get real, nobody likes doing public appearances. But on the flip side, you know, you're going to find this is a really great little stress relief because you're basically going to be finding out that all this stress, all this effort you've been putting into stuff has somebody actually interested in what you're doing. And you don't, that's sort of you have no idea how galvanizing that is. To have somebody believe in what you're doing that has no real, you know, I want to say there's no real emotional investment, but let's get real. As any comic pro knows, if you screw up a character, you're going to be hearing about it for decades. I don't care if it's something subtle. Just look at Kitty Pryde kissing Colossus at the wrong time. Yeah, they've had to deal with that flack for years. I don't care if you're Chris freaking Claremont. There's stuff you're going to be dealing with for years. But at the same time, you as a creator want to have some sort of fan base. Not only is this fan base going to pay the bills, and the bigger the fan base, the better the bills are going to be paid, if you get my drift, you're also going to find that there's a really great coaching situation as well as a really great energy situation. And in order to do this, occasionally you have to play to the fans. This means not just simply figuring out who the fan favorites are and playing with them. This sort of explains Wolverine and Batman and that Merc with a mouth person. But, I mean, those guys should have died a long time ago. For the popularity, I tell ya. But you also need to do personal appearances somewhere along the line. You know, show up at a convention and say, hey, I'm here. Even if it's an artist alley type of situation, you're making yourself available to your fans. And you're going to find out that a lot of your money doesn't necessarily come from the books themselves. It comes from doing the signatures. It comes from doing the commissions. It comes from doing a lot of the merch. And you can have a lot more fun with the merch than you can with your own book because you can do stuff on a poster that you can't do in the book. You know, you want to do your own fanfic based off your own characters? Trust me, not only will nobody stop you, but odds are they'll even encourage you. And sometimes in all the wrong ways, which of course eventually become all the right ways. And let's get real, if you're a comic creator and you see somebody going out there, you know, dressed up as one of your characters, you know John Byrne has got to be going ecstatic every time he sees somebody dressed up as She-Hulk. You know what I mean? And we won't talk about Eric Larson and Dragon cosplay. Even if they modify it to meet their own needs. There should be nothing wrong with somebody coming in cosplay and having a lot of fun with it and individualizing it to that particular person. But that's a minor digression. The bottom line is that you go to a convention and you actually meet your fans. Well, yeah, a lot of these people are jerks and there are going to be a lot of toxic fans. But 9 times out of 10, you're going to find out that these fans will in fact energize you. And by energizing, obviously, you know, you're energizing them and then they're energizing you right on back. It's a really great feedback loop. And if you and an artist can set up that feedback loop, yeah, you're going to be a lot more successful. So, what have you learned about baseball players? And more importantly, about ourselves? Well, first off, follow through, mandatory. You need to put as much energy into whatever you're doing in order to succeed at it. Practice doesn't just make perfect. The better you are, the more practice you're putting in. Yeah, I know it's usually the flip, but trust me, you're going to find out that if you want to get better, you're going to have to practice, you're going to have to study, you're going to have to discuss things with other people. The bottom line is, practice makes perfect because you don't have much of a choice otherwise. You're going to basically want to worry about the game. These are your extreme short-term goals. You want to get through the chapter, you want to get through the book. You know, you're going to want to win the game. Don't be afraid to accept a loss. Learn from it, obviously, but don't be afraid to accept a loss. Nonetheless, play to kick ass. You want to strategize. You want to figure out what goals are. You want to look at your goals and you necessarily reassess those goals. You want to figure out what it takes to basically make a successful comic book, and the only way you can do that is by constantly reassessing what's going on with that particular comic book. It doesn't get any simpler than that. Strategy is something you need to look into. Listen to your coach. Yeah, if you want to play with a mentor, I'm fine with that. But the bottom line is listen to the guy. Find somebody opinion you trust, and then basically talk this person up as much as you possibly can. Figure out which ways you can come up with new tricks, solve old problems, and have a lot of fun together. At the same time, make sure you work with a team in general. I don't care if it's something as simple as a booking agent. I want to go to this convention, talk to this agent. That's cool. But you also may want to be part of a comic book team. The writer, the draw. I keep wanting to go draw. The writer, the illustrator, the letterer, the colorist, so on and so forth, down to the marketing team. You want to work with that team in order to become as successful as possible. And there's always an advantage to being part of a team. Yeah, teams can get annoying, but usually it works out. You also want to play to the fans. You want to do whatever you can to do to energize your fan base so that way they can come back and energize you. And trust me, there's going to be times where you're going to appreciate that energy. If you can make it appearances, so much the better. Because there's nothing that basically allows you to see your effects of your comic as actually being there. So, the bottom line is, learn from who you can. In this case, I hope, learned a lot of stuff from baseball. That said, have a good night.